category that I'd like to talk to you about is actual ingredients in my pantry, but also big items such as your freezer. Now, the freezer really is my best friend. With having a full schedule and being quite busy in my life, I tend to cook on the weekends and therefore make lunches and baking items. And how I keep them fresh is through my freezer. The whole concept of having ingredients in your pantry is that you have them ready. You have a variety in your pantry and also in your freezer, so that when you come home from a long day, you have each individual components that you can just put something together quite quickly. The freezer is quite a trial and error area. So egg whites, for example, I didn't know up until a few years ago that you could actually freeze egg whites, each in individual size containers, and then once you have enough for a batch of meringues or bread and butter pudding is actually quite good as well. Individual sizes of breadcrumbs. If you have some stale bread left over, chuck it in the food processor, you have instant breadcrumbs. Put them into the freezer and into small sizes or Ziploc bags, and you have your crumbs ready to go instant for you. Another option is freezing cheeses and also butters. So if on the weekend you flavour some of your butters into long rolls, wrap them up in cling wrap and then chuck them into the freezer. And therefore you can turn a piece of steak that's ordinary with this flavoured butter into something that's flavoursome and quick and easy. So little tips and tricks along the way have really helped me. Not so much into the flavours have been unreal, but it's more time. It's helped me save quite a lot of time, especially with having a big, heavy, full-time schedule. It's drastic to come home and therefore I have to spend an hour over a hot stove just to actually have a meal. Whereas some of these little tips and tricks are just aimed to help you cut time. Alright, so this is a sample of my collection in my pantry, and obviously it's quite large. Being a fair few years old, spices are one thing that I've discovered, but when I first started out just to create some basic meals, I didn't really start with any particular spices. Maybe a little bit of smoked paprika, and that was about it. Since then it's really grown, but it's really up to you, taste and preferences, especially if your background, so if you come from an Italian background, you'll have a lot more spices. If you come from a European background, again, you'll have a lot more spices than what I would come from Australia, but even then, it's to taste and preferences to what you have. Condiments, containers are another big thing. So here you can see at the back here, I've got my self-raising flour, I've got my normal flour, and then I've got sugar and then sultanas in this one. But my pantry is full of these size containers, and they also have labels on them as well. So I would strongly suggest that you invest in some good containers that you can label efficiently and organise your pantry, because there's nothing worse than going into a really messy pantry, as mine is at the moment, and not being able to find what you're looking for. So I would definitely suggest these. I've adapted some of the smaller containers that I've used for my herbs and spices just from little containers lying around. These containers I've just written on as well, and I stack these up in my pantry, so I know what these are. So again, it's to your preferences. Some people prefer bottles versus containers. Other ones are these round kind of containers. They're completely sleeve through, so you can see them. You can stack them easily, but you can also put labels on them as you go. So they're just good handy size containers. For those items that you may only have like a small bag of if you use them, but again, if you have a big family, your quantities will be different to my quantities, but like pearl of barley, great size container, lasts forever. Okay, now just a note on herbs and spices. I've used a mixture between dried and fresh herbs into the past. I find two things. So the first thing is that if I have dried herbs in the cupboard, then if all else fails and I can't get hold of fresh herbs, then I've got my backup of dried herbs. So either way, again, it comes down to your preference. Some people like using dried versus fresh. Other people like using fresh versus dried. There are some benefits to using fresh herbs over dried herbs that you obviously can't do. But then again, it's come back to it, but that methodology of having dried herbs stored as a backup, if everything else fails, then you're covered. I have the usual suspects, so oregano, thyme, rosemary, basil, parsley, not so much. I don't find dried parsley as useful as fresh parsley, but I do have it in the cupboard, I just haven't used it very much. Black peppercorns and salt, and I also have ground black pepper as well, as the family does. Now for baking circles, you can literally go nuts. You can go nuts with herbs, spices, anything. Whatever the recipe calls for, you can literally go nuts. But I found ground nutmeg and ground cinnamon, especially ground cinnamon, really useful to be able to make simple dishes like muffins, cakes, anything. It just goes everywhere and anything, pretty much. I also have bay leaves. These are quite good for stocks and also other savoury dishes as well. They're really handy to have into it. And I find if I don't have them, then I notice it straight away. So it's one thing that I would definitely have in the cupboard. And then you have your condiments. Honey is really, really good. It livens up dishes. You can use it for baking, you can use it every day as a condiment on toast, but also to take meat dishes as well, like honey, soy, chicken drums. Yeah, it's all our favourite, so it's great to have in the cupboard. Oil. Now, oil is to your preference. I always keep a bottle of olive oil because I cook with it quite consistently, so I definitely have that in the cupboard. Baking powder is always a must for any kind of baking, but again, these aren't limited, so whatever your preferences are, these were just the ingredients that first come to mind when I put Stockman's Daughter together, to be able to say to somebody that these are the things, if I had to look back on, that it really would have helped me in the beginning. Do be warned, your first shop. The first thing that I remember from when I moved out of home into my own small apartment during my university days was I was completely, utterly shocked at my first grocery shop. It cost $400 and I couldn't figure out why. Why did it cost so much and for so little? And then I worked out, well, I actually had to buy all of these things in the first place, because when you move out of home, you don't exactly take the spice collection with you, do you? So this is just giving you a small snapshot of what's the most important to me at the time and looking back on that journey. But again, it is to your own preference. Now, jarred and tin stuff. Now, these things are just good to have in your cupboard as backup, so that if when push comes to shove, you're strapped for time and you're looking to put a meal on the table, you can just grab something and make something with it. So I've got minced garlic as well. I like to use fresh as well, but again, as a good backup, this is great to have in the cupboard. Tin stuff, so tin tomatoes. This is apricot nectar, make apricot chicken. Mustards. Cannot go wrong with whole grain mustard. Dijon mustard is another one, but as a push, if you ask me which one I choose, I'd choose this one. It just takes a piece of meat to be able to put into a marinade for about 20 minutes to a whole new level. Jams, again, this stuff is really great for breakfasts, but it also, if you can chuck it on meats, it gives it quite a nice different flavour to it. So this is kumquat marmalade. I know, marmalade on meat, you must be nuts. I know, but still, put it on a piece of pork chop and let it marinate, and you'll be quite surprised at the flavour to come over to it. But again, breakfast dishes on toast, can't go wrong. And that is about it. Well, I really hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you get out of it as much as what I would have liked to get out of it if I had have watched it when I moved out of home. And if you have any suggestions or comments, please feel free to send us one through our website. Thank you.